One of the most important moments of One Piece history that forever changed the story. Luffy's Gear 5, his fifth form. The awakened form of his mythical Zoan devil fruit, model Nika, and believed to be Joy Boy, or at least he looked like him, as Joy Boy was the only other user of this devil fruit. Now, I want to talk about something relating to this. People talk about whether or not Luffy had earned this through proper setup or if it came out of nowhere. Okay, fine. That conversation is essentially a branch of my idea. What I want to talk about was it effectively foreshadowed? Because here's the thing. Foreshadowing is something that Oda is famous for within the community. But with Joy Boy and the Nika Fruit event, a lot of people didn't exactly meet eye to eye about the moment itself. So we want to look into what was really the truth. Now, if you do enjoy the video, leave a like as it helps get the video out further. And subscribe because I'm trying to hit 1K subs on this channel. And well, what is foreshadowing? Google defines it as be warning or indication, parentheses, of a future event. If you're not familiar with it as a literary element, you'd be able to see that and be like, well, yeah, I think, yeah, that makes sense. That's what foreshadowing is. But foreshadowing isn't just dropping hints about future events. It's about laying the groundwork that makes the future moments feel both surprising, but also inevitable. It's like building a house and you need a proper foundation before you can add the roof. The type of roof, whatever the heck you want to do, that could be a surprise. Go ahead. The main thing that is required is the structure to which you put it on. Now, there are generally two types of foreshadowing. There's direct foreshadowing, where the story explicitly tells you something is coming, but you might not realize its importance at that time. Shanks tells Luffy to return him the hat for when he becomes a great pirate. This is telling you about the future and how much this hat is really going to mean to him, because it's supposed to be a key point of the journey, the end of it. Then there's indirect foreshadowing, where the story places subtle clues that only make sense in retrospect. The kind of things that make you go, okay, I get that one. But what makes foreshadowing effective is that it has to feel natural in the moment. Each piece needs to serve the current story while secretly serving the future story. An example of what I think is good foreshadowing specifically in One Piece is the poneglyphs and the ancient weapons. The ancient weapons are first mentioned in Alabasta. We learn about Pluton through Robin's search and Crocodile's goals, but notice how our first introduction of them serves the current arc story, adds depth to Robin's character, creates immediate tension, and it sets up a lot of future plot points. And then the story continues and we get more pieces, Poseidon and Fishman Island, the in general importance of the poneglyphs, the world government's fears, everything that was happening in the Void Century. Every piece feels natural in its moment while building to something bigger. By the time we reach current events, the ancient weapons don't feel like they came out of nowhere because they've always really been a part of this world. That's what good foreshadowing looks like. It's not just about dropping hints, it's about building a coherent world where these major important events feel earned. So now that we understand what we're looking for, let's examine Joy Boy and see if it meets the same standards. Now with Joy Boy, it's a bit of a two-piece in this assessment. There's Joy Boy as the figure, the guy in history, and then there's the connection between Joy Boy and Luffy's devil fruit. Our first real introduction to Joy Boy comes during Fishman Island, where we learn about an apology that he left on a poneglyph. This adds mystery by asking the question, well, who is Joy Boy? It shows that he had connections to the Fishmen and Fishman Island, And it also established him as someone who had failed to keep a promise. If we're not including Wano, due to the fact that this is where it all happened, this is a good bit rough, because our first mention of the Sun God Nika comes from Who's Who in chapter 1018 in a fight against Jinbei. It's good that we finally made that connection, but there's an extremely large gap between Fishman Island and Wano. In addition to that, why wouldn't they just make the connection back then where it'd be so crucial? That would explain the sun symbol entirely. And after that, well, what else would we have throughout One Piece? Well, nothing. But a lot of people would say that there were visual hints all along. Because firstly, we would have Skypiea with that campfire scene, and Luffy's silhouette dancing looks sort of like Nika imagery. But here's the thing, Oda has definitely used silhouettes before, and similar silhouettes, like Brook in Fishman Island, but without later context, there's nothing that specifically connects this to Nika or a sun god. We also had Luffy's enormous shadow in the clouds over Jaya, and the context had been really getting across that the Sky Island was real, and that Luffy is someone that will fulfill his dreams and the dreams of others. That connects to Luffy's image of being a dreamer and a liberator of the people, leading them to their dreams too. Did it tell us about Joy Boy or Nika without the context we had in Wano and then on? No, not really, not at all, no. There's also Fisher Tiger's sun mark, which again, great symbol for the people and everything, but that's still Wano, where it all happened. But while these establish the sun as a symbol of freedom in One Piece, they don't specifically foreshadow Luffy's fruit being the Nika fruit. That's the key difference. Thematic consistency is also not the same as foreshadowing. Think about how One Piece usually does big reveals. Remember our ancient weapons example? Each piece made sense in its moment, add new information, connected clearly to previous hints, and built towards something specific. This Nika reveal doesn't follow this pattern. Instead, it feels more like Oda took an existing theme and symbol and retroactively connected them to make this new concept. So let's circle back to our original two-part assessment to give you that answer. Number 1, Joy Boy as a historical figure. Before Wano, we had very little, because we have the mysterious apology in Fishman Island, and then that's it.
That's all, folks.
Everything else we know about Joy Boy, Roger's reaction, the Sea King's prophecy, Odin's connection, Kaido's obsession, Zunisha, all of that comes from Wano itself. And that's not foreshadowing. If it happens in the arc that it's present in, at that point, that's just exposition. And second, the Nika connection to Luffy's devil fruit, well, that's even more condensed, because there's no setup before Wano at all. The first mention is by Who's Who in 1018. Most evidence only makes sense in retrospect, and it relies heavily on general sun imagery rather than the actual specific connections that we would need for something else, like the ancient weapons, for example. And the critical world building implications have all been introduced very late, with this all happening in Wano. This actually makes our analysis even clearer. What we're seeing isn't One Piece's usual careful build-up over the course of multiple arcs. We get one piece of a genuine setup having in Fishman Island, and then a huge info dump in Wano, and then retroactive connections to these existing points and themes. The sun as a symbol of freedom, of course, I get it, that's always been there. Luffy as a liberator, of course, that's consistent, he is a liberator. Godspeed to Luffy. But the specific connection to a sun god, a hidden devil fruit, and adding this on, an 800-year chase by the world government, for something this massive, this is central to the story, and the setup is surprisingly thin. And speaking of this 800-year chase, my goodness, let's talk about Gear 5. So according to the 5 elders, the world government has been trying to get this fruit for 800 years. It's been so important that they even changed its name to hide its true nature. And yet, Luffy fights multiple CP9 agents. No reaction. Luffy punches a celestial dragon. Nothing about his fruit. He breaks into and out of Impel Down. Silence. Causes chaos at Marineford. Still nothing. Even fights with Fujitora directly, a Marine Admiral. Zero concern about his powers. He had also fought against Kizaru indirectly. He fought against really all of them, and nothing happened. How has no one asked questions about his power? Luffy being a rubber man isn't some sort of hidden secret added onto that, and if they know about these rubber-like properties being a sign of the Nika Zone fruit, how has no one done anything about this? It's only when we learn through Who's Who that the government was guarding this fruit specifically, and that was right before the reveal. That isn't setup, that's a last minute context. And I understand where they're talking about the devil fruit as if it has a mind of its own, and that it gravitated over to Luffy somehow through fate and all. And that's completely fine. That's not my issue. My only issue is that how have they not heard anything? That doesn't make any sense. They're like the all-seeing eye, dude. But let's talk about the fruit itself. Pre-Wano, what did we know about zoans? They have 3 forms: base, hybrid, and the full-on beast. They have enhanced physical abilities. They also give instincts of their animal type. Now, looking at Luffy's powers before Gear 5, we had stretching, inflation, and rubber properties. These are creative uses of rubber properties, not transformations like we see with the other zones. Some may argue, well, mythical zones are special. Yes, of course, they are. But even other mythical zones like Marco and Kaido can show clear connections to their mythical creatures before revealing their special powers. Luffy's powers only start feeling mythical after we're told that they are. Now, I understand what you're thinking. You're probably saying, hey Caleb, Luffy's powers never made any sense before, because you can't just inflate your bones by blowing into your thumb. This explains all the weird stuff that he could do. Well, let's pause right there. Luffy and Brook can drink milk and have their bones instantly heal. That wouldn't get attributed to Gear 5. It would be a gag, because Brook is right there. Or also, when Nami is able to punch the life out of Luffy despite him being made of rubber, and she doesn't use Armament or Conqueror's Haki to do so. That's just a gag. See, One Piece will operate on cartoon logic when it wants to, as Oda is someone who had largely been inspired by Dragon Ball, which has a lot of wonky gags. We wouldn't be that surprised. It feels like we're applying different standards here. When other characters do impossible things, we accept it as One Piece being One Piece. Oh, it's a gag. It's funny. But with Luffy, suddenly every gag moment needs to be explained by, well, actually, it was Gear 5 all along? Come on.
Ridiculous.
So after all of this, well, what do we call it? For all that Joy Boy and Nika are, with the themes of freedom and liberation alongside fitting Luffy's character, that's great. The issues, almost all the setup happens within Wano. It creates essentially a plot hole with the previous world government's encounters. It retroactively changes how we really understand devil fruits, which I understand can be changed and they can give us additional context later on. But that's additional context later on, and that's not foreshadowing. And lastly, it lacks the careful build-up that One Piece is known for. And here's what I think is really going on. Oda had always planned for Luffy to be a liberator figure. The sun imagery, the themes of freedom, bringing joy to others, and that was always there. But the specific mechanism, making his fruit the Nika fruit, connecting it to Joy Boy, that feels like a later addition, which may have not been the intention, but had been the case in terms of execution. And that's all I got. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, peace out and Godspeed.